Welcome to Third Eye Thinkers. I'm your host, Michelle Welch.
Hi, I'm your host, Megan Benanti, and today we've got a really special guest for you guys. So we have Lori Lancashire here with us. She's a licensed professional counselor in Dallas, Texas, and she specializes in relational trauma, addiction, eating disorders, and is a certified brain spotting practitioner. She's hosted 2 radio shows, The Food Fight and Recover Joy Radio. Lori aims to empower you to rediscover your self-value with strategies to heal your spirit and soul that can tangibly be put to use in real life. So we are so glad to have you here, Lori.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
this is fun.
So
Love this.
we are just excited to have you here. I've known Lori a long time, and I've gotten to do some really great experiences with her that we're going to share with you all today. Lori, can you tell us a little bit about how you connect people with their intuitive selves through your therapy?
Sure. It is the basis of everything that I think I'm gifted to do. Ultimately, through my own healing and training, I think that what we are aiming to do is really reconnect people to their authentic self. And I do this through the model of Pia Melody from the Meadows. And the way that that works is we know that when children are young, they believe that most of what's going on in their family system has to do with them. Mm-hmm. They're not able to identify with the fact that mom and dad are stressed out, paying the mortgage, going to work. And so if they have a sense of needing to adapt to the family system in order to be good, then they are going to do so. And what that does is it causes people to offline from their intuitive knowing and their intuitive self, right?
Wow.
So if you have major trauma in your family and you have adapted over and over and over again, by the time that you get to be an adult, what you have learned is that in order to receive love, that you are going to look outside of yourself in order to get that. This is where all addiction is based in. This is where eating disorders are based in, shopping, gambling, food addictions. All of that comes from the fact that at some point in your life, you made a decision that out there is where you wanted to belong instead of in here. And so what I am trained to do through Pia's model is take people back into their family of origin and really start to heal that. And the way that we do that is we separate out the adapted wounded child from the functional adult. Some people have a functional adult on board and some people don't. Right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people walking around as teenagers in adult bodies. And what's interesting about using that model is instead of coming from a place where you are black and white and you're thinking of I'm either good or I'm bad, I'm either lovable or I'm not, is that you can separate out that wounded child and you essentially put your arm around your inner self and you recover yourself, right? So that's why my website's Recover Joy, right?
Awesome.
Yeah. And so that is really the foundation at which I try to get people connected to their sense of being their own superhero, right? And I believe that we all have that direct channel to God. And there's no earning that. So I think that that's a basis of being able to connect to the functional adult that you believe in will actually rescue you, is that the channel you have to your spiritual sense of self is one based in abundance versus scarcity, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I believe really then, if you look at that and you look at the relationships that you're in and all the dysfunction that we're having in relationships, a lot of times people get caught into really negotiating being right or wrong in their reality. Instead of walking together, they want this enmeshment that mirrors what their family system looked like. So we pull people in to hold up the mirror to then heal our unresolved issues, right? And I don't think that ever ends. And so when we're looking at another person to make us happy and be relational with and we're trying to share our reality with that person, if they are able to listen to understand instead of defend, that in itself is a spiritual moment, right?
Absolutely.
Because what that is giving you in a relationship is safety and security, obviously, but it is also the ability to share your true self with someone, that authentic self, to connect back to that. And really, I don't know that I've ever met anybody that comes from a fully functional family that got 100% of the love they needed, 100% of the time they needed it, when they needed it, you know? And so when you put your arm around the little kiddo that lives inside of you and you put them behind you and you say, watch me do relationship, right?
Wow.
That's the spiritual moment at which you are willing to say, I'm going to go from this intuitive place of knowing that I'm okay because I'm okay, not I'm okay because you say I'm okay, right? And so Pia's whole model is based on the word codependence, which didn't really arrive in our culture until the 80s. And when you think about the generational passing down of what we all got, I think we're really the first group of people that have had the opportunity to intuitively connect to ourselves, right?
I would agree with that.
I guess I'm curious. So if we basically, going back to right when you began to talk and you're talking about what we do as children, it's how early would you want to ideally get someone, a child, let's say, if maybe the parents weren't there yet, but and maybe there was some dysfunction, a child in therapy. I mean, if to work on that. So maybe they wouldn't have to go through that as an adult.
Right. Well, that's the unfortunate part of the story.
It is. It is. So, and the only way you can usually get them is through courts, right?
No, it's actually, you know, if there is such an opportunity to get to the pearly gates and ask the one question before they decide to let me in or not, it is, why did you make children's brains limited and not to a place where until the age of 25 we logic and reason with our prefrontal cortex, right? Why do we take everything in and hold it and carry it energetically from our family system, you know? And my answer to that, I believe, is so that as adults we can make the decision that we need something bigger than ourselves, an omnipotent belief. And if that's shoved at us as children, we oftentimes have a harder time disconnecting from what we should do in order to earn favor and be good as adults, because we've just got those tapes rolling from what our parents told us was going to save us, make us good, be in the favor of God, that kind of thing, you know?
Wow.
Do you
find that the people the children, let's say within a family system, if there's those who play the archetype role, the clown, and maybe it's not called the clown, but the joker, the clown, the whatever
scapegoat, the hero, the lost child,
whatever, all those, do they all fill in, and is that why they're filling in different ways? Do they still, is that them making up for some sort of, it doesn't seem like necessarily some will armor in different ways, I guess is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which seems really basic, but some walk on eggshells within that seems to go into empathy or being an empath.
It's basic until you become an adult and you realize, do I want to keep being the scapegoat?
Yeah.
Do I want to keep being the invisible lost child in the family?
Right.
You know, how's being the truth teller serving me, you know? And then, you know, what we do is we work through a model of learning to value yourself from within, knowing that nobody's got the yardstick. You've got it because you breathe air, you're a child of God. That's it, right? Then knowing your boundaries. How do you protect yourself? Nobody's there to protect us as kids. You know, our mother and our father are supposed to do that. But if they abandon and neglect us, whether they mean to or they don't, right, then we've got a wound we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to not have very good boundaries as adults. So who's going to teach us how to do that? Another human being? Probably not. We're probably going to have to get into some form of therapy. And then sharing our reality. You know, is this true for me? Is it not true for me? Do I need more information? That's something that a lot of people don't think to do. They just stand in their right way of thinking because it's always been like this and I'm not going to question it. But the beauty of being an adult is that you do get choice, you know, and you don't swing as an adult. You live in a moderate place. And so if you're able to do all of those things in a fairly functional way, then you stand a chance of really connecting to that intuitive self that is the spiritual walk of being alive as a human or as a spiritual being in human school, right?
You said something to me once that really impacted me, and it was about kids and anything that they don't experience as love is trauma. Is that right? Or
Anything less than nurturing is abuse.
okay, and that's really hard to take in, you know,
Yeah.
because as a parent,
That's why
we all
that's
know
why
we
I
make
have
mistakes.
sent my kids to therapists so that I can make up for those non-nurturing moments where I got into my humanity, right? And my job as an adult is to go to my children and say, hey, I'm accountable for that behavior. I'm really sorry. There's no guidebook for this, you know? And I'm going to work on that. This isn't about you. Go be a kid, you know? And hopefully they hear that.
How many of you out there now are wanting to call your kids right now? I am. Let's just take a break.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really.
But
I mean,
you
it was-
aren't your children's God, and you don't want to be, right? And so in order for them to connect to that, you have to kind of fail somewhere along the way, you know? Otherwise, they're walking around thinking everything's going to go their way. That's not a very fun human to be around.
Oh no, it's not. I know one of those.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really fabulous how attuned you are to the spiritual component. How unusual do you find that in your career and the intuition aspect and tapping into that? I will just tell you, I asked that question because of being in the field I'm in. I find a lot of people that I want to refer, and I said this to you before the show, that I want to refer to someone just like you.
Right.
And I haven't found it really easy
Right.
to find someone, and maybe it's because they're just not advertising it, or maybe there just aren't that many.
Well, I might be at an unfair advantage because I was raised by two individuals that really allowed us as kids to figure out our own spirituality, but based in Native American, a Native American foundation, and experiencing a connection with nature, but also Eastern philosophy, and then mixed in with that, the biblical that came from my grandmother. And so I got a lot of different ideals that I was allowed to pull from and what works for me. No one ever said there was a should around God. It was, God is everywhere, right? God's in you, God is everywhere. And that was just a really wonderful message that my parents were able to give me. So there's an openness for me that, you know, I haven't had to get through religious shame and figure out how to disconnect from that.
You're ahead of us.
Well, isn't that, I mean, really, it is truly a gift that they gave me.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is. And
truly
so what they taught me and instilled in me is always be a seeker, right? Always keep moving forward. Get into a place where you want to be the master of your own life. And my mother believes in reincarnation, so it was, you want to do this again? Keep doing what you're doing, because you're going to repeat this, you know, somewhat threatening.
Yeah, thanks,
And I
Mom.
didn't. You know, there were a lot of times in my life I was like, okay, I need to learn what this is so I don't repeat this.
Well, that
you know?
threat's a little better than, do you want to go to hell? I mean, I'll take that one.
Right. So it kept me always wanting to move forward. And so, you know, I don't know that everybody gets that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. And I'm also really pretty isolated because as a psychotherapist, we spend our time alone with clients, right? And so our intermingling, unless we're in consultation groups or going to do more training, we really do show up at the office in the morning, go home at night, and we do it again the next day. We don't talk to anybody about that kind of stuff, right? So if there are therapists out there, I would hope there would be that have that openness, then you know.
That's a good point. I do the same
Let
thing.
me know.
I mean, if
Yeah.
I didn't have this and Michelle, I really
Right.
wouldn't be talking to much of
Right.
anyone about it
Right.
Yeah.
besides clients.
So,
So you had mentioned that there's a common like mistake between intuition and impulsiveness, and
right.
would you go into that?
Yeah, so I got this when I experienced a moment in my life where I had to seek out a 12-step program for Al-Anon. And what I learned in that, page 86, 87, 88 of the big book, is my favorite. And I mean, I think I have it recited. It's, you know, something to the, or memorized. It's something to the effect of, upon awakening, we ask God for direction. And in the beginning, we will think that it is take a left turn here, that we are being inspired at every turn, right? And then we learn the difference between inspiration and impulse, ultimately. And so when we think about our selves as just kind of the mammal in the brain, we have a very reactive brain. It likes to solve problems. If there isn't a problem, it likes to make one up, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so we really have to train ourselves out of that. And then we have to realize what's our fight or flight, what's our protective mechanisms, am I working in a love dependent or a love avoidant way? And learning the difference between a reaction and a response. And I believe the only way you're going to do that is if you are operating from that functional adult place, right? So those 5 things that I mentioned: value, boundaries, reality, dependency. What are my needs and my wants? That's a big one, because a lot of times if we grow up in a toxic family, we don't have a clue what we want because we're so busy making sure they're okay, so we're okay, right? And living in a moderate way. And if we're able to do those things for ourselves, then we're able to sit with us. So we're able to sit with uncomfortable feelings. We're able to get into some meditative space where we can pause and wait for that direction and inspiration from our higher power of our understanding.
Wow. Yeah, that's very true. There you see so often, and I know that we go into it, that fight or flight mode, that impulsiveness. And I find that sometimes when I get checked, it's very jarring, but really helpful. And those are the points at which I grow the most.
Yeah, if you're into self-mastery.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of, I mean, for me, that's part of my life purpose is to evolve in this life.
So if you're impulsive, what you're going to do is you're going to pour yourself another drink, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, or reach in the pantry, or, you know, it's more.
Or snap.
Right.
You know,
or
at
get into
someone.
rage, anger, control, or withdraw, be the victim, that kind of stuff. So it's boundaries and being able to esteem yourself from within and connecting to that part of your authentic self that's really going to stop you from being impulsive.
So
Do
true.
you
Through
tend
my
to
lens.
see, I'm just curious, as you talk, more adults in your practice or families, or what's your
I
practice?
see a lot of individuals. I see a lot of women. Women come to therapy more than men. Oftentimes men are being dragged in. And across the board, I think that the younger generations are starting to get more self-actualized, and they actually are looking for more help than maybe the older generation. And I will see children, but I do that from an interview type place. I don't bring children in very often, but I have had some very highly evolved kiddos in my practice that blow me away. So it's amazing what kids can take on board. But again, it's just really dependent on the family. You know, if the family's supportive and they're creating that nurturing environment, then I will do it. Otherwise, I send them to a play therapist. But lots of teenagers, lots of kiddos that are 20-something, you know, trying to figure out their life path, who they are, separating from mom and dad. It's very anxiety-provoking. And then I specialize in couples. I've been trained by Terry Real in Boston. I specialize in eating disorders and trauma, and
Can you tell us a little bit about your training with Terry Real?
Yeah, sure. Terry, I call him kind of the wizard of couples counseling. Every time I sit with him or listen to him, I'm just like, I hope I get what you have someday, you know. He's a New York Times bestseller. He has written the book New Rules of Marriage, and what I love about his book is in the back there's a very small little space that's like the cliff notes of the entire book of how to kind of do marriage. And so what he outlines is losing strategies and winning strategies in relationships, and really teaches therapists across the country how to get people to stop engaging in having their stance that they stick to, and that really keeps them into what he calls misery stabilizers, and just starting to learn to listen to each other. He does a lot of work with men on trying to get them to be gentle men, right?
Oh, wow.
Which I love.
Yeah.
So with that training, it's actually where I know you guys want to talk about this is where I met a woman who did something called brain spotting. And that is a really interesting story because I was in New York at a training that Terry was doing, and this wonderful woman stood up and had all this power about her, and I instantly was like, okay, who is she and what's going on? And then she spoke, and I was like, Texas woman. She's from San Antonio, and she said, you know, I've trained with Terry, I've trained with Pia, and I do this thing called brain spotting. And she sat back down, and I thought, okay, what's brain spotting? I'm going to look that up. Never looked it up, went to lunch with a bunch of people in the training. 2 years later, I am having this low-grade anxiety that I can't seem to get rid of. And I'm pretty sure it has something to do with my mom. When I'm about 8 years old, and my mother raged in our family. She was raised by an alcoholic, and so at times when she would get angry, she would get really angry. And to an 8-year-old, it almost seemed like she was turning into a werewolf to me. And she was real scary. And so when I was dealing with some conflict in my life, as we all do as humans, I started to get into that fear place, and I could not unhook from it. And something just kept coming back. And this is that pause, wait, ask to be shown, intuitive part of how I live my life. What do I do with this? And brain spotting came up. Charlie came up. The memory of her 2 years later. And so I shot her an email, and I said, I have no idea if you can help me. I met you 2 years ago. I need to come work with you, I think. And she said in one email back, come down here, I'll feed you.
Oh, wow.
And I started crying, I think. It was like going home to mama, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think within 3 weeks, I flew down to meet with her, and I did a 2-day intensive with her around some of my trauma, which I had done before. And, you know, that's the thing that people don't understand. It's just layer by layer by layer. I was really angry the first time I went through therapy, and I thought, okay, I've done it. I've got it. I'm good.
Yeah.
And then something bad happened, and I was like, wait a minute. I thought I did this, you know? But we manage this the rest of our lives. It is what we learn as kids. We literally are undoing the rest of our lives.
Wow.
You know? Yeah.
That's huge.
But then I kind of think our soul came in with an agreement to do that.
Oh, yeah.
You
I
know?
would agree with you.
I was going to
So,
ask you that, if you did think that.
Yeah, I do. I really do. And so I go down to Charlie, and she's going to do this brain spotting. And she said, you know, did you look it up? I said, no, absolutely not. I am a trial by fire kind of person. I just want the experience. I had no clue what it was. And so I sit down, she gets this pointer, she goes across my field of vision with this pointer. And what brain spotting is, just to give a little insight to that, is it is a psychotherapy approach that we use the field of vision to find brain spots, those moments of trauma that we hold in our brain that, thank God, when we're kids, we have defense mechanisms that encapsulate that trauma and protects us, right? And it holds it there. It's why we have flashbulb memories. And so it holds it there. And then what's interesting about it is, as you're scanning someone's field of vision, they have reflexes that they're really not even aware of, right? So we're watching for the eyes to make movements or blinks, or a knee might jerk or swallow. And we then focus in on the pointer, and we have that experience with that. So I'll tell you what my experience was. So she gives me this pointer. I have no idea what I'm doing. And she puts on bilateral music, which goes in between the left and right brain. And it's wonderful, soothing music. And I sit there and I'm looking at this pointer. I don't know what's going to happen. And the room all of a sudden starts to get really milky. And then the whole room becomes cloudy. And I can't see her anymore. And I described it as going through kind of a different portal, right? But ultimately what happens is flashes of memories start coming up. And I had one eye that teared profusely and one eye, not one tear.
Wow.
And I don't know what that's about. She doesn't know what that's about. Brain science is really new. We're not sure what it's about, but I can tell you that months and months have gone by and I don't have that low-grade anxiety any longer, right? And so when I did that, I ran and got trained in brain spotting, and it's also something that I offer people, and I've done it many times, and everybody has a little bit of a different experience. I've had one woman who suffers from anxiety, and while she was looking at this pointer, holding her field of vision at the place in which she feels most activated in her body, she says, "This is weird. I'm seeing avocado green." And then as her therapist, I know her history. You know, we don't just jump in. And she said, "I'm seeing my neighbor's house." And I knew that her neighbor's house was the very first time that she felt panic because a little boy said, "Your mom and dad are leaving and they're not going to take you with them and you're going to be here forever." Right?
Oh, wow.
And so she freaks out. But what's great about that is the avocado green comes up because she was in the 70s during that time.
Oh, yes, of course.
Right? And so our brain knows how to heal us. And the part about brain spotting is it takes you out of your logic and your reasoning, and it connects you to your midbrain, your subcortical brain, where logic and reasoning aren't going to help you. So you connect to your nervous system, and your nervous system unravels that trauma. And it might take a couple of times to do something like that, depending on what the trauma is and how much work you've done on yourself, right? But it is a profound new model that I'm loving. Yeah.
I loved it. I had the pleasure of doing it once.
Yeah.
And it was... the room really does go milky, which I know sounds weird, but it just kind of fades out. You're just focused on this one little point. And Lori was like checking me because she said I had several points at which I reacted, so several traumas in there that needed to be kind of dealt with, and I just settled on one. Yeah, it was really restorative, and it reminded me very much of our healing work, just in a different way, because I think one of the ways as humans that we really benefit is by, you know, trying out different modalities and having these different experiences, which is part of the reason Michelle and I have this show, you know.
How do you decide if someone was going to make an appointment? Would you decide if you were going to use the brain spotting, or would they come in for an appointment or would they make that appointment and say, "Hey, I would like to try the brain spotting," or would you? How would that happen?
You know, I've got to get a little bit of a history, because if you've got complex trauma, this is really great for it. And it's something that I want to make sure that I have enough time with that person so that if on the back end of experiencing the brain spotting, a lot of stuff comes up, that we have time to process it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that with a lot of the work we do too.
Yeah.
I say that as strange as it may seem. I say that with a crystal that I work with. It's black obsidian. It'll bring up a lot of trauma because it's made from volcanic glass. So people will just work with black obsidian a lot, and they'll just plop it on clients, or they'll just say, "Here, wear this," or "Just take this." And I'm like, you might want to make sure you're going to see that client again, or know their history, or know what you're doing. It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
That you don't want to just throw them out there after they've done it.
Right.
If you don't know their history, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if they were going to make an appointment, you would consult with them first, and
For sure.
okay.
For sure.
So it's not just a novelty to come do brain spotting, I guess is what I'm getting at.
if you believe that you can and come in and have a novel experience and you want to check it out, I'll give you 20 minutes of brain spotting. Let's see what comes up. I guarantee you'll come back.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fine. But
Yeah.
I, as the person in charge of that,
Right.
am going to make sure that we have
Yeah.
a safe environment to do that in.
It sounds
right?
fascinating.
It is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's truly amazing. You know, and the thing about what we want is we just want to be at neutral. You know, we want to have that homeostasis, right? We don't want to be up here in hypervigilance. We don't want to be in underwhelm. And so the thing about brain spotting is, as long as you are not so hyperactive and hypervigilant, then if you come in, we use a scale called a SUD scale, 0 to 10, 10 being highly activated, 0 being not. If you're at a 6 or a 7 and you don't go to a 10 and you're able to maintain that 6 or 7, brain spotting is going to bring whatever that negative event is down to a lower level. I haven't had anybody say, oh, I don't feel any different. No one has said that.
Wow.
Yeah. So the other thing about it is it tends to work on your nervous system for a couple of days afterwards. So some people notice that, some people don't. I've had people say that they felt nauseous for a few days or they got anxious for a few days. But also what I offer is if you're working with me, you'll get my cell phone, and if something's going on, you can call me, you know?
Well, and that's releasing. It's a form of detoxification, I think.
I
So,
think so too.
Yeah.
It's common with a lot of types of healing. And how did they come up with that name? Did they say?
Yeah, well, there's the brain spot, right? So what are we doing? We're brain spotting. I mean, he has an acronym for it, BSP, and he just decided, David Grand, it shouldn't be BS because that probably wouldn't work real well.
It'd be such a great idea.
So what he actually, David Grand, who developed this, was EMDR trained. And EMDR, from my understanding, is more rapid along the visual field. So if you ever catch yourself looking at a spot and you find yourself kind of zoning out or gazing to that spot, it's really encouraged to continue to look at that spot because your brain is giving you some sort of information with that. And if you'll go and look at that and say, okay, now I'm aware that I'm gaze spotting, what's going on in my body? What am I thinking of? What needs to be processed here, right? It's your body's natural ability to heal itself. And so you can do it at home. You know, that's the beauty. I had one girl, and if anybody is listening and this, you know, they've got kids around or this is traumatic for them, then just be aware of that. She was in her young 20s, and she came in, and I had seen her for months. And she came in, she had done something to her chin, and she was crying. She didn't know why she was crying. She was so upset, really scuffed up her chin from a fall. And I said, well, let's brain spot it and see what happens. And then 5 minutes in, she starts crying, and she said, oh, I didn't think that was going to come up. And she couldn't talk to me about it in that moment, but it was a rape that she had experienced that she had told no one. And so then I said, you know what? We don't have to talk about the specifics, but why don't you just share with me the feelings that you're having? And so she took the headphones off, and she looked directly up at a bookcase, and then, you know, tried to look at me and give me eye contact. I said, no, look at the bookcase. That's where your brain wants you to be. Be there, trust that. And she told me the whole story looking at that bookcase. The next time she came in, she sat down on the sofa, looked straight up at the bookcase. And I said, look at where you're looking. And she was like, oh my gosh. So if you notice if you want to try it out at home and you notice where we look affects how we feel. So if you're struggling with something and you look to the left and it doesn't feel better, look to the right. See if it makes a difference. Look up, look down, right? Look around the room, because visually we have different points in our brain that are more resourcing for us and more activating.
Wow. So that's a great way to get into the subconscious mind. And when some people a lot of times are worried, they're like, my third eye is not open. I'm like, it's always open. but sometimes I feel like we live in our consciousness so much to function that we're feeling disconnected from it. And
Right.
so that's a great way to just tap right into that, is find
Open-eyed meditation. You can
focal
call it
point.
whatever
Love
you
that.
want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
Oh, I love
cool.
that.
Yeah.
How long has it been around, this brain spotting?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to
I mean,
that.
it seems
wish I
like maybe
knew.
not that long.
No,
because
it
it's
hasn't.
not.
It hasn't been that long for me, but being trained in that, and it's something that there are people that are trained in Brazil. There are people that are trained. I watched a woman on Facebook who was in Vienna, and she was doing an experiential role play to show us how to do brain spotting with children. Which I have done that as well. I did that with an 11-year-old who was grieving the loss of a nanny that she was really close to.
Oh.
And she cried through the whole thing. And I said, okay, what's going on? Her mom was sitting right there, and they were very open to that. And she said, I got to see her in a field, and we held hands. And then she told me she had to go. Isn't that sweet?
Yeah.
I know. So it can be really helpful to connect a lot of people. They also use it for performance anxiety,
Oh, wow.
I can
which
see that.
yeah, which is really great. So that's how he first discovered it, and that was with an ice skater who was having a hard time with her triple loop, and she wouldn't land it exactly right. And so they videotaped that, and at the moment that she was messing up on her triple loop, he said, okay, let's brain spot that spot. And what came through was the years of surgeries and pain and the drive from her parents to get to the rink. And so there's a lot that can be done with it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, tell us. So, if you do these intensives, and I had not. You're the first person that introduced me to the idea of therapy intensives. So, can you describe that a little bit?
Sure.
Or what
So
that
I
process
do 2-day therapeutic intensives where we start at 10 and we end at 3, we end at 5, just depending on how complex your trauma is. And we go into your family of origin. We write down all the players, the walls that they use to stay safe, the roles you play, the rules you played by, and how that's acting out in your life. Or playing out in your life, and really going through Pia Melody's model. I usually have people read Facing Codependence, which is her book, before they come in, and going through her model and seeing where are you behaving like the wounded child, like the teenager. And then we do inner child work where it's an experiential, where you close your eyes and you have this wonderful communication with your inner child, making a promise that you will be the protector, the best friend, the superhero, the mom, the dad, the lover that they've always wanted, right? And once we've done that, then there's the fun stuff of empty chair technique, where you give back the carried energy that wasn't yours. And that's a neat concept in that if you imagine, children don't have boundary systems, so they just remain open in a home. And there's energy that's going around their environment. And so let's just pick dad drinks every night, and the only time he pays attention to you if you come in and you're cute, right? You tap dance. And so you then learn how to tap dance for love. But what you also pick up is that shame that dad's trying to drink away, and you feel it, and it doesn't feel good, and it's got this low vibration that you just hold and you don't know where it comes from. My mother, who turned into the werewolf, had to give some of that back. Wasn't mine, And we deal with a lot of carried energy that we give back to our caregivers, and it's amazing when people close their eyes and they envision the parent that raised them then, not the parent they know now, but the parent that raised them then. What are they doing in that chair? A lot of times there's a parent that's smirking, there's a parent that's the victim, right? And we ask them to please sit up and be present because we deserve it, right? And you claim that. And so there's a lot of reclaiming what is rightfully ours to begin with. But being in human school,
Yeah.
right, we have to learn that we deserve that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would think this would make people be better parents too, or maybe not make them, but help them become more aware if they were going through this before they had children.
Yeah, I was probably 33. I think that was about the age I was when I got into therapy and started working with a PIA trained therapist. And I'm now 47, so I hope that my kids have benefited from that. And that was an interesting awakening for me because my marriage was falling apart. And what I really was able to be accountable for was how withdrawn I was and how I would hold on to resentments and not talk about them. Asking for what I wanted was so scary because my mother would have just yelled at me. Why would I ask for what I wanted?
Right.
And so I decided for myself that I was going to do the work, and if it worked out, great. If it didn't, okay, we'd move on. But I learned at 33 to be an adult, truly. And I really don't think I was in my body until I was 30 anyway. I was pretty disassociated in the sense of, just kind of walking around being there and where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know, wherever you want to go to dinner, And now I actually know where I want to go to dinner, and I have worked on identifying what I want and what works for me and what my deal breakers are and, have a functional adult dialogue.
Yeah.
And I don't always maintain it, but, I'm working on it.
Right.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Well, we kind of have to wrap up
Yeah,
just
we
because
do.
we're out of time. But
It's fascinating.
Lori, I could listen to you all day.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
a
It's
lot
so
of
much
g-
fun.
Yeah.
I know, and it
I love
just
it. I
takes
hope
me
it helps
through-
someone.
Oh, we hope so too. Please leave us your
Yeah.
comments below, everyone, because
Yes.
we're always interested in what you have to say. So you all have been listening to Third Eye Thinkers with Michelle Welch and Megan Benanti and Lori Lancashire today. If you enjoyed the show, please follow us and subscribe to it. We're going to be on YouTube and on Facebook as Third Eye Thinkers.
And we will put where we can locate Lori too.
Oh, yeah.
right?
Oh, my
Let's
gosh.
just
Thank you.
do
So
say
sorry.
that, and we can put that in the comments
Thanks
below.
so much.
too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
recoverjoy.com, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.